Welcome to the Facebook Native Politicians Google Hangout. This is a big experiment here where we've asked people to take a little bit of time to watch a presentation about sort of a case study in Minneapolis about how this new generation, particularly with the 30-somethings who got elected to the City Council of Minneapolis, are using the internet particularly Facebook, to engage their constituents on a daily basis. And the idea is that people have watched the 30-minute presentation, and then the reason for the Hangout is actually for us to have a two-way exchange. It may be 3 people, it may be 10 people, we're not quite sure. This is an experiment, and I'm waiting now to see if folks will join. We had about 10 RSVPs, and as you know, the internet, at least my experience, is that real-time stuff is an extra challenge. It's not, people will say they're going to come, and we'll find out if they do. And if they do, we're going to have a good conversation. We are going to have a follow-up conversation starting at 8 p.m. Central. We designed one that was more open to the Americas in the evening and our Asia Pacific friends. This is sort of connected to the Open Government and Civic Technology Facebook group and the Democracies Online newswire, both of which are hosted and promoted by eDemocracy. So just hang tight, and we're going to see whether or not we set all this up properly for everyone who's supposed to show up So I don't think I can pause the broadcast while we do that, but I wanted to start it to make sure that people were able to come in. I'm used to regular Hangouts where they're not recorded, so we'll learn as we go here. Okay. Isn't this fun? So I spent a bunch of time this morning promoting this across a number of Facebook groups. And the problem with that is you really don't know what kind of carriage it has. And when you say join us in 30 minutes, people might not see it until after we get started. We did a bunch of promotion on a bunch of different mailing lists as well. And like I said, had about a dozen RSVPs in different settings. Just as long as I'm chatting here, and this will be recorded, we created a Facebook event tied to the Open Government and Civic Technology Facebook group, where we had about a dozen RSVPs. The challenge, obviously, is that when you ask people to RSVP for an event on Google using a Facebook event, is they say yes on Facebook, but not on Google. And so what does that mean? We'll find out. But as an organizer, you always, and I've done a lot of work with this Kettering project with real live online deliberation, where you start with, dozens of people and you figure out who can actually make it at a certain time. So this is a lesson as we go here. So I'm just going to do a couple quick messages to folks so that I make sure that they know via these different channels how to find us right now. So pardon me. And then what I'm going to do next is, let's see here. Too many windows. This is on 8 p.m. tonight. We also organized an event, like I said, at different times so that we can all right, so what I'm going to do now is take a little time to tell you more about what's happening here in Minneapolis and sort of some of the reactions to the presentation. in London. So if you watch the full, I don't know, 2-hour video, which they did a great job of editing down, you'll note that at least my enthusiasm was different than the second speaker, who sort of talked about the reality of a lack of engagement, at least by Twitter, where he was most active with his actual constituents. And I don't have his name right in front of me right now, but I think it's really instructive to watch the full event and to sort of get a sense about how this sort of is an ebb and flow. So here you had someone who, you know, for the last decade or so has been highly engaged. But as it turned out, when it came down to his actual local constituency, you know, being a nationally known cyber politician didn't necessarily give him the engagement he needed with his local officials. And I had some rather negative things to say about Twitter, but basically I have this take that Twitter is in particular good for, like, our state legislature in Minnesota here, pound, hash, MN-leg, excuse me. You know, it's very active, and a lot of it's communication at a more political level. It's about messaging the media, but messaging political activists. And in general, you know, obviously you have a stronger party system at the local level in the UK. But my sense is that a lot of the Twitter use is really more for connecting with journalists, connecting with activists, and really less so your actual voters, your actual constituents. And so if you could say the decline or the reality that in this case that Twitter isn't reaching who you want to engage in your constituency, then I view Facebook as sort of the emerging trend where, you know, that's where more people participate, a broader cross-section of the population. And that engagement is something that we need to be mindful of and to take advantage of. The third speaker, who was a counselor who was more positive, from Kingston, one of the things is I know Mary Reid, who's the board chair of eDemocracy, is actually a former Kingston upon Thames local councilor, and had mentioned that, you know, for years, this very grassroots-oriented politician in the Liberal Democratic Party was not strongly, was not super enthusiastic about social media initially, was sort of a slow in coming, and now has embraced it deeply and has found, you know, her emergence into it is very timely and very effective. And so you had sort of this very interesting contrast. And so one of the goals and one of the sort of lessons from that event was, you know, obviously different tools are going to work differently in different places. There was another counselor who was in the audience from actually county council in Cambridgeshire, I believe, or Cambridge County Council. Not sure exactly how you say it, but he made a comment about how he lived in a very Twitter-esque kind of community, and I think that's true too. I mean, there may be certain places where Twitter does go deep and does go more local. So the reason my motivation for sort of bringing this Facebook native politician discussion to a broader audience is that living in Minneapolis, sort of having a generation of extra online engagement going back to the early days of eDemocracy with our Minneapolis Issues Forum and the like, that doesn't really necessarily matter to this new wave of politician. I mean, Andrew Johnson is a new council member elected at 29. He was 10 years old when eDemocracy started, you know, 14 when the Minneapolis Issues Forum was created. And so his frame is not going to be one where he's gone through, you know, all this evolution of the use of social media, online media for participation in the city. It's going to be, I'm an everyday person. I'm a high schooler on Facebook. I've discovered these tools, and you're basically come as a social media native, if you will, someone who has been on these tools for quite some time. You also, assuming you watched my presentation, you also note that there was a really interesting sort of, I guess, case that a lot of the existing re-elected city council members, so 7 new ones, average age 33, 6 returners, average age 50, but the mayor was I believe elected at 45. She was a council member. A number of the council members, just no matter their age, even the most senior members, are pretty darn active on Facebook and social media, and so it really has created this environment where every day. And so you know, as long as I'm here, and what I like to do is actually sort of give you a live tour of what's happening right now. The key is that what we're seeing is sort of daily use. And then I see some folks that say they're going to be coming in with perhaps some questions, and I'm going to try to make it a two-way dialogue as best when folks show up in the video side. People can watch this without actually showing up on the video side, so it's something that's sort of new to me. So I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to do a little screen share and give you a real-time tour of some things that are happening just today. All right, so here's my screen over here that I'm sharing. So in Minneapolis right now, sort of as a follow-up to what we've been experiencing in with our budget, you know, there's been a number of members, you know, engaging. So just here at my top of my feed, this is my personal feed, right? So here's Blong Yang. He's a city council member here. Look at this. So for some reason, Facebook has decided that, you know, 2 of his posts are right here front and center in my feed. I figured out that I'm friends with, close that. Friends with all but one of the 13 city council members. I'm also friends with the mayor on Facebook, friends with the police chief. And, you know, so one thing about Blong and how he uses it, he tends to, he, you know, sort of reflects on this experience. He basically was not someone who, quote, friended for office. In my presentation, I mentioned that he said, I was a nobody, you know, I had 100 friends and now I have 1,000 friends, you know, and so folks are branding him as he's becoming engaged. And so, you know, he has often very sort of thoughtful questions, puts it out there, and, you know, Blong notably represents a substantially African-American area in North Minneapolis, and is also the first Hmong American council member. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to some of the home pages or sort of personal pages of city council members in real time here. So, and I'm not taking you to their Facebook pages. I'm taking you to their personal pages. So Alondro is sort of, I think she's one of my heroes here. She when she was first elected, I think I mentioned this in the presentation, but you know, she basically said, should we change the direction of these two-way streets? What I had not seen until that point was someone who was willing to sort of ask questions. Like, you know, I mean, the people were definitely doing some of that kind of engaging, but it was just a really authentic sort of form of engagement. So actually, here's a little campaigning mixed in here. So she's having some campaign activities. This is a personal page, so you can do that. So here she, oh, looks like this. So here's a post here about restoring an effort to restore full funding for the Clean Energy Partnership. Her previous post earlier in the day, let me just get to it here. So you can see she's very active. She and Elizabeth Glidden both basically said, you know, why cut taxes 0.14%? It was a 7-6 vote in the council. And the council vice president, Elizabeth Glidden, who's a returning member, and Alondro, as well as Andrew Johnson, posted, you know, questions about why, you know, why is this happening? And so she posted her note, basically, you know, expressing concern about this. So you can see just a sense. So here's this vote. They're talking about the vote. Here's a story from the local paper, and you know, 30 some odd comments. And now it's notable here is an issue. They were basically had some equity positions. So one Minneapolis fund. So there are two things that got cut. One was around increasing racial sort of diversity and public participation. The other was around a clean energy fund. And you'll see here notable, they had, you know, two of the new council members who won the Somali American, Abdi Warsami and Blong Yang, voted against that budget item. So it isn't just sort of new versus old, if you will, and then who knows what I don't know the scale of this issue. but you know, a lot of engagement happening. And so let me go into Andrew Johnson. So Andrew posted to his page yesterday, the day before. You know, budget markup is complete. I think several of us are feeling shell shocked. You know, they decided to increase flying corporate execs into town to, you know, for economic development, I assume, yet increasing funding on diversifying boards and the like. And that was a limited. Rough day at the office. Okay, so 40 comments, a council member liking it, 53 people total, well, 56 people liking it. And, you know, someone said, well, why, you know, why did the mayor do that? And Andrew came in and said, no, actually the mayor, this is the mayor's budget they were amending. And the mayor was, you know, out there trying to, you know, make that happen. I'll keep going on Andrew here for a second. You know, some of these you can see are just for friends posts. He normally does public posts, and he's a good guy, so hopefully he won't be upset about this. But, you know, here's just a comment. There was a protest about Ferguson and a car drove into it in Minneapolis. I don't know the full story about it, but, you know, he's obviously upset about it and made a comment about that. Here he talked about why it was important when he went door knocking. Again, this is a personal note or a closed note. So often you'll find a mix of public and private. Sometimes things that are more political. Depends, you know, it'll vary. So you may have heard of Pointergate. That wasn't in my presentation. And so Mayor Hodges is a key figure in that example where Betsy, so she's very active on Facebook. She was a city council member for, I'm not sure, for 4 or 8 years. I think 8 years. And, you know, you can see actually in this case here, you see a lot of people are tagging her. See, right? So they basically mention her in a post, and it shows up on her home thing. And so you'll notice this one about bicycles. So here's one from Betsy. You know, here we go. Updated snow emergency app. You know, promoting that public posts here. You can see, and people sharing that. Here's someone's criticizing the mayor about arts funding. So there was an issue about that. So you can see there's a accountability piece that happens here. And the like, and so you know, just it's the real deal, if you will. So here, there's this big discussion about a closing bar. I can't believe it's going to close. I can't believe someone won't buy it. This is an institution called Nice Polonaise, Polka, and all. And this has gotten as much attention as Pointergate in the Twin Cities on Facebook. People are very upset about its closing, although maybe they haven't been there in a while. Let me find another post from Betsy that might be useful. Let's see here. Betsy's mentioning World AIDS Day. So this is a lot of times the message. So she's also done things like she's trying to have a bragging week about Minneapolis, encouraging people to get out there to say things that they are proud of their city. That was earlier in her term. There's also a great video of her sort of reading off strange tweets that she and other politicians have received at MinnPost has they call it Minn Roast, and worth a look at here. Let's see, what next do we have here? You know, so again, a public post. She almost does everything publicly. Another post by, we have a large Somali community. So I believe this person, I'm not sure what happened. Look at this. She got recognized for something. And I'm not sure, I guess she was with the mayor. And, you know, and here the most of the discussion, at least the replies, are in Somali. Hey, they have translation from Somali to English. Now that is something I've never noticed before. So Carly is very active at posting on the mayor's wall here. There's the mayor. So what I'd like to do, if someone has a question or would like to, I'm not sure how to, for those who have shown up on the video, how to make it so you, there's a group chat on the side. So if you want to put a question in here, you can, for our massive crowd of one at this moment. So go on ahead. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is a thing on Pointergate. So if you're not aware of this, since January, I've been building up the Open Government and Civic Technology Facebook group. And what this is really sort of an attempt to not just connect the open government community, because a lot of the folks in open government actually aren't all that excited about non-open source things, right? Facebook is, they use it, but there are a number of, really I run into a lot of men, to be honest, in the civic tech open government world who say, oh, they don't use Facebook. But what I find is that increasingly the wired politicians that we're trying to reach with this movement they've never heard the word open government or civic technology or open government data. They just more or less naturally are democratically spirited folks that are willing to use Facebook to engage potential voters. And then once they're elected to the office, often continue engagement and deepen it. And so my view is that having a dynamic space within Facebook, talking about open government, and then adding to that a well-organized and hopefully funded someday effort to reach out to 500 wired politicians, elected officials in different parts of the world, to bring them in. This is a bridge. And the honest truth is that, as far as I can tell, elected officials, their mailboxes are pretty stuffed, and they're not so willing to join email newsletters or really join like a traditional mailing list. But when people complain about the Facebook filter bubble, in this case, it's to our advantage in that people trust that if they like things on Facebook, if they join groups on Facebook, Facebook's computers, their filter bubble, will protect them from being over inundated by things they're actually not really interested in. Facebook's whole idea essentially is to feed you ice cream, not vegetables. On the other hand, if you think of the open government group as a sort of a nutritious meal, sometimes, that will sneak through. So maybe 1 out of 10 topics would then show up in the news feed of these more wired elected officials. And we have probably about a dozen or two that have joined that people have recommended over time. But the only way I see growing that is probably some one-by-one outreach. It typically works. So if I tweet their, a lot of times it's Twitter oriented. If it's very visible, it's elected officials who are visible on Twitter, I'm able to ping them a note and then bring them on in fairly easily. So this is my post here. I'm just going to go right into the whole piece. Where this emerged afterwards. So if you watch the video of the presentation, one of the key things was really sort of a conflict between the mayor and the police chief and a city council member, Alondra Cano, and a number of community members around an event, a community meeting organized to discuss basically police race relations. Police brutality was one of the topics, other types of things all mixed together. Those characters that were basically really upset with the mayor and very active online now, in a sense, joined forces to react very negatively to a media report about the mayor and her engagement with some Get Up the Vote efforts in North Minneapolis with someone who, as it turns out, but the mayor didn't know this, but had a record as a felon and had sort of turned his life around. Although some in the police or police union leaked this information to the media, suggesting this person was actually perhaps a gang member, perhaps still a gang member, this got so much traffic and attention, it actually ended up on the Daily Show, right? So this was not a small little just Minneapolis thing. But notably, so the exchange that happened that I described in my case study, these same actors, as I mentioned, basically were together. And, does that sort of Facebook engagement space, and Twitter was a big part of this as well with Pointergate, because of our base, did that make this a national sort of story? I'm not sure. It probably would have gone there anyway. But the ability for engagement in Facebook, in Twitter, in this case as well, in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis specifically, to, I guess, echo, create waves widely across the net, I think is related in part to our deep use of Facebook. So I'm gonna actually just do a quick little case study here of then what happens next. So this news report was cast out there. Then that night, there's a blogger, Nakima I think it's Hakima Levy-Pounds. She was the one who actually did the community letter telling the mayor you shouldn't have canceled out, or the police chief you shouldn't have canceled out on the event. So she's a key figure. She's a community blogger at the Star Tribune, the largest newspaper online site in Minnesota. A huge traffic, 400,000 people every morning. Start with the Star Tribune, and so it's a big deal. And so she has a blog in there, and so then she wrote very quickly, dear white people, Mayor Betsy Hodges is not in a gang. And that it was her story that actually led to, in the combination of these two things, that really got this sparked. It got picked up by the Daily Kos. One of the things that was notable was that this photo that was taken, you see, it's actually a screenshot from a video. There's actually a video, quite likely, of the exact moment the photo was taken. And you just see these folks kind of pointing at each other, and you hear the voice of Novell, who was the person who was whited out, or well, I guess blurred out, I guess, in the story. And then, you actually had the reaction of the local media, Channel 5 digging in their heels. And, went to, there's more exploration locally in the media. Channel 5, like I said, response is sort of like, it's still a story. And then eventually here, someone did a T-shirt about it. And it was, most viewed story locally. Pointergate began trending on Twitter. Number two nationally in the United States. It was about a day later. A council member, Blong Ying, I'm not sure that he collected this collage, but somebody did, showing the mayor pointing at lots of other people and pointing at things. The mayor is a pointer. And then even a fist in the air. So and then here comes Jon Stewart, and so on. And I'm sure there's a few other things. And then the mayor finally the next week let things kind of not settle in, but just sort of responded in great detail in her blog. And so something to note about that in this environment is that I don't know, maybe even 10 years ago, the council passed an ordinance sort of allowing their staff, and these are well-funded council members. There's 13 of them, and they each have a legislative aide and an office assistant, and themselves, they're full-time positions. But their staff are not able to help them blog. They had an issue about whether they actually initially they couldn't link to the blog, but they could have staff work on it. It was kind of a tip your toe in the water kind of thing. But what you'll find is that the blog, particularly for the mayor and some council members, is sort of used as sort of that historical archive, long form, and then they share in Facebook. When I asked the mayor and other people in prepping for my London presentation any advice they would have, Mayor Hodges actually sent me a note saying, use the notes feature in Facebook for extended commentary. So very tactical, right? So I haven't used the notes comment feature in Facebook myself. So shows that she's, knows the tool. And there we go. And so in this case, one thing I did here is I used the Open Government Group and the Facebook group to sort of just document this whole sort of evolving case study. So if you're a researcher and you're watching this, you're kind of thinking about, let's do a case study. Here's a place to start, because this was, I would say it's not. I actually prefer the extended case study that I used about the conflict between the council and the mayor. And this budget example might be a bit more instructive in that it's not just the council and basically a bunch of Minneapolis against the media, more unified. It really is about the exchange with the case study and with the budget example, different folks taking different positions. Something I haven't had a chance to do, speaking of the budget, is go in and take a look and see what other council members are saying about the budget. So that is sort of my sort of extended analysis that I can add to what I had to say. Let me just stop my screen sharing here. And if there are any questions that folks would like to pose, there's a Q&A system, and I don't know if it works or not. I tried to set it up. You can try that, or you can chat in a little box, any questions that you might have. And if not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of anything else that I might want to add at this time. So my goal with creating this event, as I should to be, I'm willing to push the envelope and expose myself, if you will, was to get about, say, 5 to 10 people gathered have some folks that, had discovered this topic and go, oh yeah, Facebook is being used in our town as well. Let's talk about this. We had a very dynamic discussion and exchange in London, and it is great when you do the in-person face-to-face. But I'm someone who feels that you shouldn't have to travel around the world or travel across town in order to connect together to have high-quality exchanges. On the other hand, what I have found in general is that it is exceedingly difficult to get people to come together at a certain time in a certain place online. And so you have to have a really big megaphone. I have a decent sized megaphone, but my guess is that perhaps the topic is not as engaging at a surface level that people perhaps that I might think it is. I'm not sure. So I'll be looking for feedback on that. Having been involved in the space for 20 years and seen politicians sort of for generations, different generations sort of engage in the Minneapolis Issues Forum. It was much more active in the early days where politicians were willing to take risks and engage in a two-way space. And the difference then was that the space was a town hall space. It's still there today with 2,000 members, but on Minneapolis issues, the previous mayor who was there for 12 years actually announced his candidacy on the space online before he did it at a press conference. Many of the people I know who ended up working for him contacted him after he announced his candidacy on that space. And so, but sort of RT used it to gather ideas about mountain biking and a bunch of different things, really in the early days. Even gave David Brower, who was the host of the Minneapolis Issues Forum, and I an award, a city award for hosting this space. But as sort of a lot of spaces that are open, essentially, I don't think the word is atrophy, but essentially the louder voices stuck around. And over time, those with power began to sort of move from people who would only post on a rare basis to more or less lurkers monitoring it. And we still have Cam Gordon, the council member, who will post. He's the one green member of the council. So you tend to have is people who are in opposition to what's happening use the tool, the issues forum, much more so than sort of this engagement that we see around ideas or sort of a two-way engagement where people aren't just taking a chunk of meat out of you. And so with this reality and having seen that evolution, and then now seeing this, I call it friending for office, but Facebook ads, as well as a sort of really dynamic friending. People are who are running for office more or less. Hey, if you're my district, yeah, let's be friends. And being more proactive about that. And then what I'm seeing is that filter of, well, you have to be their friend to engage on their personal profile. They still have pages, but again, those almost have no carriage. I mean, Facebook shows them to very, very, very very few people. You'll see that in the case study about how the police, when they announced some future community events, they had very few likes and I assume very, very few views compared to when the police chief put it on her own page. And so, to wind up this point, or to finish up this point, if you create a slightly safer space where the politician is in the center of their own social media broadcast network, essentially, where you're in their home, right? So if you're their friend, or you can actually follow them if it's a public post, not actually be their friend. And I believe if you follow them, you can post a reply on their wall if it's a public post. So it's kind of it's a little nuance. Not all the council members have turned on the follow feature because not all of them know it exists. I would guess if we had a little guidebook on how to be set up as a Facebook politician, you turn that on right away. But the key is that you're in their home essentially, and you don't call them names in their home, right? You don't go for the jugular like you do on online news commenting, in particular in the community where it's just really you have an alias. It's can be very vitriolic. Here you have your real name. You're one click away from who the heck am I, and it has sort of this quality, I guess, enhancement set of attributes. On the other hand, it also is safer in a sense to put yourself out there when they primarily are your quote friends and more or less your supporters, and you're surrounded by people essentially online who like you. And what does that say about sort of democratic accountability? So I showed you on the mayor, there are some people saying, shame on you, Mayor Hodges. You can see that it's maybe early days, and you're going to see folks that are coming from the public square, essentially coming into Facebook to interact that way. But I certainly hope that we can build on this type of engagement with the council members. One thing I think I mentioned probably in my presentation, but I think in the Q&A in London, is that clearly politicians are positioned to have that freedom as individuals to actually engage. And so one of the other sort of side issues here is that if elected officials, if civil servants, the departments, the different parts of government, if they're stuck only having pages, nameless pages on Facebook that no one actually sees their posts, it sort of suggests that it's going to be harder for institutions of government to engage via Facebook compared to an actual person. And I think the key lesson about that too is that Facebook is about people, right? And so it's much more natural for a politician to engage. And I think that that's notable. But so the overall question does that raise is that, will the only way to sort of use Facebook in an effective way to engage the public be through politicians, or can government entities, and I think they use the term online consultation or e-participation, where a government entity, an office, has a question, and wants to put it out there and feed it into an official process. There's companies like Bang the Table and MindMixer and other types of online, ideation and online engagement tools, Delib in the UK and others. What future does that kind of, sort of structured input in and impact into more formal processes that, are done by agents? How will that change or take advantage of this? And right now I'd suggest that maybe, these departments are going to have to be more proactive in engaging the actual council members in then engaging the public and asking them to help promote it or, put it on their walls with a post, and then, promise, to say, oh, we'll send the feedback for this discussion to that department, which is interesting because I've been talking a lot about how a lot of the open government movement, civic tech, folks like Code for America and others, they work primarily with the executive, the mayor's office, and or departments, CIOs, CTOs. And you think about like 311, Open 311 or 311, where there's better government service happening. But what you end up happening is that the government 311 folks do a better job answering questions so that they no longer have to talk to their council member. In some ways, the constituent service loop has been the politician's been cut out. Now, this is sort of a reverse trend where the politician is reemerging in a digital space as still being a useful character. And I think that's kind of I'm a big believer in representative democracy and representatives. So I think it's a good thing that they are finding a niche here. Well, I'm all talked out. I hope I added some context. If you actually watched 40 minutes of this, you're a hero. And so if you're not a member of the Open Government and Civic Technology Facebook group, I encourage you to join. Just search Facebook for groups about open government, and it should pop right up there. Also, you can go to edemocracy.org and look for our communities of practice. We have the Democracies Online Newswire, which is a one-way service, and we also have links to lots of other online groups in our space. And if you are an elected official and you've just watched all of this, right? Wow, you're amazing. So what I'd like you to do is just ping me, Clift, CLIFT, at e-democracy.org, or ping me on Facebook. So it's Clift, CLIFT, at e-democracy.org. And not only will I invite you into the Open Government Civic Tech group, I'm going to be creating a very small private group of only elected officials that care about how they can improve sort of their use of Facebook engagement, are interested in that. Maybe it'll be 5 of us, or I'm not one of you, but it'll be 5 or 10 or 20, I don't know. But the idea is that Minneapolis, no one has said to me, there's other cities that are just like Minneapolis where, you have a bunch of 30-somethings and older council members that are just going crazy on Facebook, like here. Show if there are other cities where this is happening in a critical mass across the whole council, let me know. I can add that to our list. But I'm really interested in having this wave of engagement be more democratic, more engaging, more inclusive. And so one of my goals in Minneapolis is to launch what I call a Get Friendly campaign. I think most of these council members would love to have more constituents realize, yes, it is okay to friend your council member, and in particular think about lower income residents, non-homeowners, people of color, people who aren't part of that community activist class, which are most friended already, right, and most connected. How do we make who actually make your friend network of your constituents far more representative of the community that you represent, and not just the folks that show up first. And I'm seeing a positive trend that we're seeing new voices in this, but I also see a lot of call them usual suspects in the mix as well, and we need to broaden and deepen that. Well, that's all I have for now, so I'm going to stop the broadcast unless our viewer here has a question. And this will be, again, this is recorded, so thanks for watching the recording. Bye now.